So I love that video. I think that really the main point of that video is how much we can become so focused in our own lives. And we know that there are issues in the world. We know that there are people who have struggles and difficulties. How can you not drive around Denver and see that same kind of person, right, on the street with a sign? But it's really hard sometimes to open up our lives to include those people, whether it's because we feel like we're powerless to help them or because, we don't have what we need, the resources or whatever, but it can become, I love the song because it talks about expanding our world to include other people, and I really love that. My paper, sorry. Thank you. So October is kind of a special month. For us, 4 years ago, we moved here to Colorado, my wife and I and our family, and we took on the calling. We felt God was calling us to come here and pastor this church. And so every year at this time, we think back, wow, it's been 2 years. Wow, it's been 3 years. This year was, wow, it's been 4 years. Wow, the time is flying by so fast. When is the day's going to come where we'll be like, wow, it's been 10 years. Wow, it's been 20 years. It's really interesting. But we're really proud and inspired by what we see God doing in the community and what we see God doing here. And so we are, even though it's been 4 years, that time has gone by so quickly, and we look forward, really with a lot of hope and optimism for the many years to come. October also kind of means that we're at the end of the year. I mean, not really, but doesn't it feel like it? Fall is here. Obviously now fall is here. It's getting cold. Halloween later this month, Thanksgiving next month, Christmas the following month, and then it's the end of the year. It's 2019. It's kind of like the final stretch. It's kind of crazy. It's got me thinking about a lot of different things. And there's a story I want to share with you. I've actually really been debating about sharing this story because I didn't want it to seem like we were trying to promote ourselves or something like that, or promote myself. But in preparation for this sermon, I felt like it's a good story to share. So it's relevant. So about 5 or 6 months ago, I had an inspiration. I don't know how else to say it. I was just doing my thing every day like normal. And for those of you who, have talked to me at any length about this topic, you know that, my wife and I, we take the practice of tithing very seriously. And I just had a thought, an epiphany just came to me one day, like that we weren't actually tithing correctly. And the context of this situation is that most people, right, all of you in the audience, have some place where you live. And you have to pay rent, or you have to pay a mortgage. And you have to pay all the fees that are associated with that, insurance and utilities and all these things, right? Adds up really fast. Adonia and I are in a situation where we don't have to pay rent. We live in the house next to the church. It's owned by the church, and it's part of the, I guess you could call it almost like a benefit of being pastors. We get the housing for free. We don't have to pay for it. It's not free, right? Someone's paying for it, but it's something that we can use freely. And I realized that, and I never thought about this before. But I realized that most people, when they tithe, when they're tithing 10% of their income, they're giving before expenses, right? You don't tithe after you pay your rent. You don't tithe after you buy your food. And at the end of the month, you're like, oh, I have $100 left. I'll give $10. Most people, when they tithe, you're giving 10% of the paycheck you get. And I was realizing that in all the people in our community, there's nobody who gets a free house. There's nobody that gets free rent. Everybody has to pay that expense. And if people are tithing before they pay that expense, how can I stand in front of everybody and ask people to give 10%? when I don't have to pay that expense? I hope you're following me. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt really embarrassed because here I was thinking that we were tithing just like everybody else, but I realized that in some way, in this way, we were expecting a higher standard of others that we weren't holding ourselves to. And I talked to my wife and I said, I had this intuition, this thought came into my head. I can't shake it. I tried to. I was like, oh, it's okay. Nobody expects us to do that. But I couldn't get it out of my mind. I really felt like God was speaking to me, something important. It was just one of those things. Like, I don't know where it came from. I never thought about it before. But it just kept coming up for me. And so I talked to my wife and I was like, look, I really want to start tithing on our income as if we were being paid and then paying rent later, just like everybody else. And right away she was like, yeah, okay. Of course, it wasn't the most exciting thought for us, but we felt that it was the right thing to do. And we felt like we can't expect anyone to do something that we're not willing to do ourselves. And that's hard because it does actually hurt a little bit. Not like painfully hurt, but it does kind of get you a little bit. To give an actual 10% out of your check it's a lot of money. Rent is high, expenses are high. A lot of people maybe just trying to make ends meet. And you get I don't know how much all of you get paid, but maybe you make $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month. To take $1,000 out of that or take $300 out of that can feel kind of painful actually. It's a lot of money, and you can think, oh, I could use that money to pay for my kids' college. I could use that money to put in my investment, my retirement account. I could use that money to put food on the table. I could use that money to do extracurricular classes for my kids. I could probably use that money more wisely than the church. I'm sure there are people who feel that way. Probably have good reason for it too. But for me, for us, it really just came down to this is something that we feel like we need to do, regardless of whether we could use that money more wisely ourselves or we have better purposes for that money. We felt like this is something that God was asking of us if we were to really have this kind of expectation of people in our community to hold ourselves to a similar standard. And so it took a little bit of a leap of faith, and that's what my sermon is talking about today. Taking a leap of faith is something that a lot of people have to do. You get married, you start a business, you make some major change in your life, you move to another city. Oftentimes requires some kind of risk because you don't know exactly how things are going to turn out in the end. And the more and more I read about leadership, the more and more I read stories of people in the Bible, the more and more I read about businesses that have become successful, they all require a certain degree of risk. They all require a certain amount of leap of faith. Many businesses that are very successful now were not seen as good ideas when they were started. People, a lot of times people who start a business or start an organization, they're kind of forward-thinking people. They think about what the need is going to be 5 or 10 years down the road, and they try to get in on the game early before anybody else. Like Starbucks was kind of one of those businesses, right? They pioneered the business of expensive coffee. And at the time when Starbucks started, people were not used to the idea of having to pay $3 for a coffee. And there was a lot of critics. People were saying, well, why would I spend $3 to go buy your coffee when I could go make coffee at home for 25 cents. A lot of times there's doubters and there's risks and you have to take a leap of faith. You have to trust your judgment, you have to trust your plan, and people of faith have to trust God. And to some degree, having a life of faith, living a life with God, sort of infers that we sometimes have to take a leap of faith. We sometimes have to trust in God's guidance. It's just the way it goes. Kind of comes with the territory. Yesterday, when I was at the West Colfax cleanup, we got paired with this mother. Her name's Chantal. And we got to talking. And it turns out that she moved to this neighborhood from Washington Park, over east, nicer neighborhood. And she was sharing with me the story of how that happened because they really liked where they were living. But she was a part of this church over there, and she went on a missions trip to Uganda. And in Uganda, they lived kind of I don't know how you say, like a very simple, kind of a communal life. Families living together in one home, and she loved it so much. She had a couple young children, and she just loved the deepness of relationship, the free-flowing, they didn't stress about a whole lot of different things. They just really enjoyed living together, and they took care of one another's kids, and they talked about God, and it was just a lot of things that she just loved about that life. And she thought to herself, I want this for my family. And her first thought was, we should all move to Uganda. That was her intention. That was her thinking. But then, and she actually came back from that trip, and then she went back again because she just loved it so much. But then while she was there, her husband, who wasn't so keen on the idea of moving to Uganda, was researching properties around Denver and was looking at a place here in West Colfax. And she, this was kind of a bit of from what I gathered from her story, was a little bit of contention. There was a little bit of argument there about whether they should move to Uganda. And then she was like, well, I don't want to move from Washington Park to West Colfax. I mean, this was like 5 years ago, right? Before all the development happening in this area, before Starbucks moved in, before the movie theater and all this new places coming in. And she was looking at a place right by the Gulch, right by where all the homeless people live, right on 12th and Raleigh over there. And she was like, I don't want to live over there. But the more that she prayed about it, and the more that she talked with her husband about it, the more she came to the realization that maybe it wasn't their path to move to Uganda. Maybe it was their path to create that closeness and that family experience, that communal type living experience here in America. And there was also certain signs that led them to feel called to move here besides that. So that's what they ended up doing. And she was sharing with me about how they lived there for a few years, and it was a very humbling experience because they're also foster kids, and so they had kids coming in and out, and they had kids of their own. It was many times difficult circumstances, but over time, they eventually made a plan, and I was so impressed by this because I thought that all these big slot homes that are going up in this part of the neighborhood are all owned by big corporations, but they actually made a plan where they got together with like 7 other families who they were sharing their experience, and they shared how they wanted to live together. And so they actually got together with these 7 other families, and they got a developer, and they made one of these big 8-unit slot homes here in the neighborhood by themselves. Like, not by themselves, but they funded it, right? They financed it. They got 7 other families to commit to buying these places, and then they bought it together. But they made changes. They all have their individual slot home, but they also are facing, like the homes facing each other. And if you see a lot of these, they're actually many of them are facing away from each other with the garages facing towards each other. If that makes sense. I don't have a picture, but you can see most of the slot homes are like that. And then also on the roof, most of the slot homes are separated. The roof terrace kind of thing is for those people. But on their slot home, they made it so the roof is just one, so they can do community gatherings and things. And then they get together once a week. They have like a communal meal, and they do things together. And she said they're really trying to work on deepening their relationship and also reaching out to the neighborhood, investing into the neighborhood. That's part of the reason why they were there. And it kind of shocked me almost, like that I was talking to this person because, kind of, wow, like what a leap of faith, right? To go to that degree. I could see a lot of people saying, oh, Uganda was great. I would love to live like that. And then just kind of go on with your life and never actually see that materialize. But to actually see that they had a vision that they believed in and they wanted, and they were able to inspire other people about that vision, and then they actually pooled their resources to be able to create something. I was like, amazing. And we drove by it. It's a really nice place. Anybody would want to live there. And it was just interesting that I had this conversation as I was preparing the sermon on taking a leap of faith. And she was telling me about how their future plans, they were already looking into buying another property, and they're going to convert it into a place where people that people on low income can live there. I mean, they're just really passionate about their vision. They're not waiting on anyone else to help them to do it. They're just doing it. Right. So I want to track back a little bit and go into the Bible. I want to talk a little bit about instances in the Bible where God has asked people to do things that are kind of unreasonable. It's very common in the Bible to read about situations where God asks somebody to do something very unreasonable, kind of almost borderline insane, to be honest. God asked Noah to build a huge boat on the top of a mountain. God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son. This isn't so unreasonable, but in the Garden of Eden, God asked Adam and Eve, do not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The Bible contains many examples of God asking something of people. And the rest of the story is people trying to live that out in their life, that commitment that they made or following that thing that God asked them to do. So it's very common in the Bible for God to ask something of his people. I want to share a little bit from the story of Cain and Abel. Most of you, I'm sure, know the story. God asked, it's actually just like a paragraph in the Bible. But God asked Cain and Abel to make a sacrifice. Abel made a sacrifice of crops. Cain made a sacrifice of animals. And God did not accept Cain's sacrifice, but he accepted Abel's sacrifice. And Cain was furious. Well, anyway, I'll read it. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So, this is an interesting story because growing up in a Catholic school and Christian Protestant school, it's really hard to explain this kind of story without the context of the divine principle. Because when you hear a story like this, it seems strange. Like, well, God asked them both to give an offering. Why didn't he accept Cain's offering? Was he just being cruel? Was he just testing Cain? Was he just trying to put him in a difficult situation? Why? Why couldn't God just accept both offerings? So why did God even have to ask them to give an offering in the first place? So, we know that Cain was angry, obviously more than angry. He was furious with his brother. And God told him, if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? If you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. And one of the things that I was always told about this story growing up from my Christian Bible teachers and things like that, and similar stories in the Bible, is that God uses these kind of situations to test people and to demonstrate his power. Because if God puts them in a difficult situation, it puts them in a situation where they need to trust God, and then God can demonstrate his power to them. But it never really sat right with me. And I love the interpretation that the divine principle gives us on these kind of stories. So for this one, for example, let's see here. Okay. From the time of creation, this is from the Divine Principle. This is our major text besides the Bible. From the time of creation, God predestined that his will be accomplished based on the combined fulfillment of God's portion of responsibility and the human portion of responsibility. God could not instruct Cain and Abel on how to properly make their sacrifices because it was their portion of responsibility that Cain make a sacrifice with Abel's help. So fundamentally, what this is saying is that God didn't not accept Cain's sacrifice in order to punish him or to belittle him or to make him angry, but Cain needed to make the offering together with his brother. And it's like the verse goes here from here that many of you have probably heard. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. This is a very common verse. But one of the things that I think we don't touch on enough is that it's actually really hard to ask. Cain needed to go to his brother and ask him, what did you do? Why was your offering accepted? Help me to have my sacrifice to be accepted, my offering accepted. Let's do it together. But instead he was jealous and angry, and he ended up killing his brother, opposite of what God wanted. But God didn't step in and stop Cain. God didn't step in and tell him what he was doing wrong. I mean, he kind of did. He said, don't give in to your anger. But he didn't give him the specific instructions. It's very hard to ask, honestly, because, we look at our own lives. And I think probably everybody here has this curiosity, question in their mind. What should I be doing with my life? What does God want of me in my life? But it's actually one thing to go from the point of wondering how you should live your life and to actually asking God sincerely, what should I do? Because if you were to ask God, what should I be doing with my life? I don't think that any of you would think that if you were to ask God and pray to God and he's going to come back to you at some point and say, you know what, I'm good. I don't need anything. You just relax, enjoy your life. I don't think that God would say that to anybody because the world has a lot of needs and God has needs too. So we know that. We know that if we ask God, God's probably going to give us an answer. And do we want that answer? Are we willing to follow through with whatever it is that God asks us to do? It takes a certain degree of humility, and it takes a willingness to follow whatever that answer happens to be. I was listening to one of Rick Warren's sermons. For those of you who don't know Rick Warren, he's a famous Christian pastor, one of my idols in a way. Tried to learn a lot about how he became successful. He built his church from nothing out in Orange County, California. And I was listening to a sermon that he gave a couple years ago. And when he first started his church, he committed 40 years of his life. He was 20-something at the time. He said, God, I'm going to give the next 40 years of my life to this church, to grow this church. And it was funny. He was sharing about how it was coming to be 40 years anniversary of him starting the church. And the church had grown to over 100,000 people, and probably, according to any metric you could apply to, it was a very successful church. And he was asking God, what do I do now? I committed my 40 years. I followed through with my 40 years. The church has grown. It's become very successful. We've started churches in other countries and all over the country, so on and so forth. And and he was praying and he was sharing about it, and something about it really moved me. He said, God, please tell me, do you want me to continue to pastor this church? Do you want me to, if you want me to, I'm willing. If you want me to step down, I'm willing. if you want me to do something harder, I'm willing. And I thought to myself, wow, that is really a man of God right there, because I would have a hard time to pray a prayer like that. To say to God, after having accomplished so much already, to say that, I'm willing to do something harder. I'm willing to do something bigger if you call me to it. And he's already in his 60s now, having health complications and all these things, after having already accomplished a lot. And I thought that's really kind of an attitude, a humbleness, an objectivity to God that I really want to have in my own life. I thought it was really beautiful. I've been reading the New Testament lately, and it's really interesting to read about these people who lived thousands of years ago. It really puts a lot of things into perspective for me, because here we are, right? We're all alive, we're all living our lives, we're doing different things, and you're reading about some people who lived thousands of years ago, and it's interesting because many of the people who were the original disciples of Jesus, many of the people who grew the Christian church, many of these people who did significant things, many of those people I just mentioned, their name might be in there. Maybe once or twice. It might say something about what they did or how they died or something like that. And it will mention some kind of a key pivotal moment that they contributed to God's work. But those people lived lives, right? They had jobs, they had businesses, they had families, they had day-to-day things that they did. But history doesn't necessarily remember those things. History doesn't necessarily care about the things that we did necessarily in our day-to-day life. Even though these people, did their best to live faithfully and to do something important in their lives. And it was kind of interesting because I had to put this in perspective for myself. This past week, I was shopping for Halloween costumes. And we're doing, like I said earlier, Star Wars theme. And I'm so excited because it's kind of like a childhood fantasy, I guess, to do a Star Wars theme, and I'm having so much fun going to these thrift stores and finding $2 lightsabers, and they're so cool. They're nothing like when I was a kid, right? It might light up when I was young, but now they have motion sensors, so when you swing it does a certain sound, but if you stop, it does a clashing sound, and it's really cool. There's so many different kinds now, and I was having a lot of fun with it, but then I was remembering, of course, obviously, this is a significant, important thing. It's a family thing. It's developed good memories, and I hope that makes a difference going forward in my children's lives and in their children's lives and my great-grandchildren's lives. But I also know that, I know history is not going to care about my experience going thrift store shopping for Halloween costumes. No one's going to write that in the history books. No one's going to care. I care, but I was thinking about how, 100 years, 200 years down the road, what do I want to be remembered for? There's so many people who do many different meaningful things in their lives, whether it's in the field of religion or whether it's in the field of, business or economics or government or whatever. And, I'd like to be remembered in some way if possible. And but I was just thinking, we may not necessarily always know the most important thing that we should be doing in our lives, but we can ask God, what could I do? And maybe history won't remember it, but if God remembers it, if it's meaningful to God, then I can take that to the bank when I go in the ground. And we all have different skills. We all have different passions. We all have different things that we can contribute. I'm a pastor, but that doesn't mean that everyone should be a pastor. And I think that we need to take the opportunity it takes a little bit of humility. It takes a willingness to act on whatever answer we get from God, but to go and ask God, what should I do with my life? It doesn't matter if I'm 80 years old or 20 years old or 8 years old. It doesn't mean it can't change either. Maybe you do one thing for part of your life and you do another thing for a part of your life. But I believe, sincerely, all of us who are in the room here today want to live that kind of life. We want to live in relationship with God. We want to be doing something meaningful with our life that means something to God, that will be remembered. Hopefully by history, but maybe not, preferably. And it's going to take something on our part. God always asks something. We have to make it the effort. We have to, where did I put this here somewhere? Where did I do? God needs us to take a step towards Him, whether it's through making a condition, whether it's through taking an action, whether it's taking a risk, stepping out on faith, seeking His guidance, asking for it, and to show our commitment. These are things that God asked of all people in history that He worked with, that He asked to do something. He asked something of them. And I think that sometimes in our modern society, we think that God doesn't have any expectations, that we can just live our life however we want to, and God will just bless it magically or something like that. There's here, I really like this part from the Divine Principle. I know that if some of you who are new to the principle may not get where I'm coming from with this, but please allow me to explain. So with the fall as a condition, Satan bound human beings in a relationship with him. So we fell away from God, right? So Satan has a relationship with us because we went towards him instead of to God at the beginning. Consequently, God does not grant grace to people without a necessary condition. For if he were to do so, Satan would make accusations. So God would like to bless us unconditionally, right? This was the original intention. And we just live in closeness with God. And God could bless us like any parent would, naturally, based on our maturity, right? But what the principle is saying here is that if God doesn't expect anything from us in order to give his blessing to us, or in order to work in our lives in a more powerful way than he already does, then Satan also does not need a condition to act in our life as well, to cause suffering and misery in our lives. It's a little bit of a tug-of-war, a little bit of a balancing act. So in order for God to be able to give his blessing to us, he needs us to take a little leap of faith, step in the direction. Or, therefore, when God is about to give grace, he puts the person through a test either before or after the grace to prevent Satan's accusation. Or we might end up receiving some kind of grace in our life, but then go through some kind of challenge and difficulty afterwards. And that's why it's important in all situations to express gratitude. Because we don't know why things are happening in our life. But if we're experiencing some kind of grace, if we're experiencing some kind of blessing, if we're getting some kind of positive intuition, God is speaking to us, God is showing us some direction for our life, then we need to understand that there will probably be some kind of a difficult circumstance that we need to go through, to overcome, to be grateful for, and go through with the heart of humility and the heart of gratitude, so that at the end of the day, God can say that it was okay for him to give that blessing to us. And when you look at the Bible, you can see that all God's people, all the people that God called to do something, had to go through some kind of difficulty. They had to go through some kind of challenging experience in their life, whether it was, look at Moses. Difficult life. He had to go up on the mountain for 40 days and pray and fast, and then he came down and he was so upset, and he threw down the tablets and he destroyed them, And he made all the Israelites drink the gold from the golden calf that they had made. And then he had to go up again and do another 40 days of prayer and fasting. And then he wasn't even able to go to the land of Canaan at the end of the day. What a drag. That maybe wasn't the best example. But when we look at different people in the Bible, we see that people, things don't come freely. And we need to remember that when difficulties come in our life, when challenges come in our life, we're not just living lives, and we're not just living a life that has no greater meaning or no spiritual meaning, God's not a part of it or whatever. We are living life with God. We're living spiritual lives. We're living meaningful lives and historical lives. And that means that we're going to go through challenges sometimes. How we approach those challenges, how we deal with those challenges, the attitude when we have, when we go through those challenges is what counts. Cain couldn't overcome his anger and his frustration towards, not just towards his brother, but obviously towards God as well. He couldn't see what was happening. He couldn't be grateful for the experience. He couldn't see that if he had taken that experience and united with his brother and made unity with his brother and made the offering together, that his life would have been better. Together, him and his brother would have made the offering together with God, and they would have restored something, the mistake that happened in the fall. But he gave in to his own feelings of anger and hurt, and he didn't listen to God. So I just want to ask that as we look at our own lives today, I believe that God is working. 4 years of ministry has taught us that God is working in people's lives. It may not seem as miraculous. You read the stories in the Bible, and it talks about how people are being resurrected and healed of their illnesses and things like that. It's not so obvious in today's world, but I am convinced. I see that God is working in people's lives. God is trying to reach out to us. God is trying to touch us, and God is trying to show us things and guide our lives. And I think that the degree that he can do that, a lot of depends on our willingness. That's why I don't think that when we pray, if we don't pray, when we're praying to God for guidance, we have to really ask ourselves, am I willing to do what God asked me to do? Because if we pray, but we aren't actually willing to make whatever a change or adjustment is required in our life, I don't think that God will give us an answer. It's not sincere. And it was interesting when I was reading Rick Warren's prayer, and I was thinking to myself, can I pray that prayer? It was really hard. It was really hard because, this past 4 years, we've had our slow times, we've had our times where we haven't been as busy, but I feel like we've just invested everything into this church. And no. Thank you, but it's okay. But to tell God, I'm willing to do something else if that's what you want me to do. I'm willing to let go of this if that's what you want me to do. That's pretty hard. That's really hard. But it represented, I loved how Rick Warren, after 40 years of service, could still pray that prayer. It's a sign to me that he really is a man of God. So, when we look at our own lives, just in conclusion, when we look at our own lives, you may feel like God is guiding you in a certain direction. You may feel like God is giving you some nudges, giving you some signs here and there. Maybe not. But I implore you that, if you feel that, if you see that, follow that. God wouldn't be calling you in that direction if there wasn't a reason for it. And it's not a reason that just benefits others and leaves me out to dry. It's something that will benefit me and will benefit everybody else. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share the story about tithing, because, it's a very kind of intimate story for us, but I also felt like, maybe other people have questions about it too, or maybe God is talking to you about something, about tithing or something like that, or something similar in your life. And so if God is talking to you in some way like that, please listen. Please listen and please find what it is that way that we can fulfill God's calling in our life so that we can live proud and meaningful lives in front of history, in front of our children, in front of our descendants. I was thinking about how, when my kids have kids, they're not going to know the me who is now. They're not going to know the young me who's in his 30s, prime of his life. They're going to know the old guy, who's like talking about his experiences from many years ago. And I just was thinking about that, and I was like, I really want to, be able to share inspiring in stories of God working in our life with my grandchildren. So that's my message, and please join me in prayer. Good morning, our most beloved Heavenly Parent. We're so grateful for this day. I'm so grateful for everybody that came here despite the cold weather and the cloudiness today. Heavenly Parent, each and every one of us is trying to live our lives the best we can. We live in an imperfect world. We come from imperfect families, and we're just trying to do the best with what we have. And your whole experience with humanity is working with imperfect people, many people who will pray to you, God, I'm going to do this, but then they won't. And so many people who made promises and didn't fulfill on them, Heavenly Parent. And we have the stories of those select people who followed through with their prayers. And when you asked something of them that was difficult, they did it on faith, even if they didn't always understand why. Even if it meant that they would be ridiculed or criticized in their lifetime. But we look at those people and we know that they're your champions, they're your saints, Heavenly Parent. When we look back on history now, that they helped to move forward your work, your providence in this world. And I really believe that everybody here as a community and as individuals, we also have that same heart. We know that there's so much shameful history of humanity, so many people who have let you down and have perpetuated pain in this world. And we don't want to be like that. We want your guidance, Heavenly Parent. We want your guidance in our lives. We want to do something that means something to you, that made a difference. Regardless of how old we are, how young we are, what we've already done in our life, or what we're already doing. I just pray that you can guide each and every single person here, that we can find our calling, that we can find our purpose. We can make you proud. We can inspire you. That we can bring hope to so many people in this world who have given up on believing that you even exist, or that you are a loving God, or that you are a part of our everyday lives. I pray that we can be able to share our testimony with others of how you are living and breathing in our lives every day. How much you have been a blessing in our lives, even though sometimes we have to go through challenges, even though we go through difficulties, even though we go through experiences we don't even know why. But I pray that we can have the heart to always be grateful. Thank you, God, for this difficult experience. We know that through this experience, you were trying to love me, you were trying to bless me, that I can be a blessing to other people of this world, that I could grow as a person. Because at the end of the day, we know that you're a loving God. We know that you love us and you love all of your children. And I pray, Heavenly Parent, that we can all seek what it is that we can do in our lives. And that when the time comes, when we see the opportunity, when we hear the calling, even if it's not today, even if it's not next month, even if it's not 10 years down the road, that we can be ready. We can be ready to take that leap of faith. We can be ready to take that jump. thank you, Heavenly Parent, for all the experiences, all the opportunities, all the challenges that we have gone through, and pray with excitement and optimism for a bright and beautiful future for our community and for this world. And I offer this prayer in the name of Michael and Adonia Hentrick, a blessed central family. Amen and Aju. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Pastor Mike. I really felt that was a beautiful message, wasn't it? I felt so much that these are the kind of words that I want my children to hear. That if they ask God, that God can answer. And if they have a good attitude through difficulties, that God can be there and God can bless them. So, that was very beautiful. Thank you, Pastor Mike. Now at this point, we're going to have our offering and reflection time. So we'll be playing some nice music. If you haven't had a chance yet to give your donation or tithe, we'll have the offering basket come down the aisle and you can put your offering in there. And just take this time also to reflect back on the message, what touched you, what that means to you.
Yeah, super excited to be able to share all the announcements that we have. A lot of really great stuff coming up. First of all, if you missed it, you merely missed a really awesome experience. Yesterday was the Extreme Community Makeover West Colfax cleanup, and you can see us up there in the corner. And it was just such a great opportunity. This is just one of the groups. There was probably 50 people there. And we got to go around the neighborhood. Different groups did painting benches, graffiti removal, alley cleanups. We went to the Eagleton Elementary School and prepped their community garden plots for the next year. And it was just a really great opportunity to meet some people. I got to meet this lady in the bottom left with the baby on her shoulder. That's Chantal. And I'm going to be actually talking about her later in my sermon. And then the lady next to her, his name was Concha. And it was just so many great people. And I realized it's a great opportunity to meet altruistic people when you go to a place where people are doing altruistic things. So I encourage you to come and participate next time. They do it twice a year, and we'll let you know when the next one is. This week's Bible study, the subject is Jesus' mission, the kingdom or the cross. And that will be at 7 p.m. here at the church, led by my father, Dr. Hentrick. We have an exciting youth service coming up, October 28th, Halloween. It's going to be really cool, like Halloween-themed youth service. And I love youth service in our churches because in a lot of churches, a youth service means somebody like me coming up who's like in their 30s or maybe someone in their 20s. But for us, a youth service means you're going to probably hear from someone who's somewhere between 9 and 12 years old. So it's going to be really awesome, needless to say. So I'm excited about that. We'll announce kind of more details as we get closer to the time. And, of course, it's Halloween, and October 28th will be our Halloween party. So we're still working out details, but we'll be announcing those. But it's always fun. It's a great time to dress up. Our family is going to be Star Wars this year. So, please dress up your best, and maybe you'll take the prizes home. And we'll just have a good time and look forward to that. So the Amazing Natural World Ministry, led by Roger Fuhrer, is having their next outing. It's going to be an urban hike here in the city. And it's going to be along the Platte River. It's going to be a beautiful hike to be able to see the fall foliage. And we'll start next Sunday. It'll be from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. It's family friendly. You can bring strollers. You can bring children. It'll be a lot of fun. And, it's only the one time of the year we can see the fall foliage. So this will be really great. Please plan to come. And then we got a short video.
The court judge has spoken out about the rise in divorce in Britain.
1 in every 2 couples who live together split up by the time their first child turns 5.
Everything in this world is broken. The economy's broken. The weather is broken. Every marriage is broken. There's no perfect marriage.
There is such a need in our society. People need help with relationships. And in particular, they need help with their marriages.
Running the marriage courses over the last 30 years, we've seen countless relationships refreshed, strengthened, and even transformed all around the world.
And our longing is that it would be completely normal for every couple to invest in their relationship by doing the marriage courses.
We wanted to do the marriage preparation course because we realised that our marriage was more important than the wedding.
It's an exciting environment to be in because it almost feels like a date night despite there being other people around you.
And the course as well just creates a safe space to ask those bigger questions and go deeper, with tools to be able to do that practically.
For some people, doing a course maybe seems like there's problems, or you have to work something out, rather than it just being quite a proactive step in establishing good communication, expectation, all that kind of stuff.
And that we were celebrated for being there despite the fact that we weren't married and that we weren't religious was brilliant. It just left me able to enjoy and accept all the wonderful things that were being offered.
While we were on the marriage course, we were invited to attend the Alpha course, and we went and we loved it.
The marriage courses are so easy to run. There are so many incredible resources that have been prepared for you to enable you to do that, and that just really frees us up to be able to focus on the hospitality.
Since doing the marriage course, it has helped us to remember why we got together in the first place.
Okay, so it's really loud. So the marriage course, obviously, we're doing one soon, starting November 6th. It's 7 weeks. It'll be going from November 6th to December 18th. It's just a fantastic experience. My wife and I went through it last year. We didn't do it because we were in trouble in our relationship. We just thought it would be really great to get some new tools, maybe, open up some new conversations. And it was just wonderful. Every night is like a date night. Different people prepare really nice restaurant quality meals. And there's a video, and you share privately. It's not, you don't have to share private, intimate details with other people, that aren't your spouse. And I love that it can benefit anybody. So I really would like to ask that if you know somebody, even if yourself, you've already done it or you don't feel like it's for you, but you probably know somebody who might be looking for, next step in their relationship, or maybe they're just going into marriage, and you feel like this would be a helpful springboard for them to be able to have a successful relationship. It doesn't matter where you are in your life. This is valuable for anybody, so you can invite your friend, you can invite your neighbor. It doesn't matter what religious background you're from. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or you don't. This course is really great, so we're going to be starting that very soon. I'll be sending out an email where you can register, or you can forward it to somebody that you think, you would like to participate in it. And if you have any questions about what it's like, you can talk to any of the number of people in our community who have gone through the course already. And of course, you can talk with Andrew, because Andrew is the one who's initiating and spearheading making these happen in our community. Let's give Andrew a round of applause for doing that. It's great. So it takes a lot of effort, actually. So here we go. That's that. It will be on Tuesdays at 6:30. Tuesdays at 6:30. As usual, we're advertising these retreats that we do in Las Vegas. These are 7-day and weekend retreats where you can really take a focused time to get away from work and get away from life and just delve into learning about God, deepening your faith, studying the Bible, studying the divine principle. And these are just some upcoming options. And if you're interested, please let us know. This is the venue, beautiful IPAC location in Las Vegas. And then lastly, if you're new or you haven't been here for a while, or if you're just really interested in, why are we here? What are we doing? What's our future vision and plan for our church? Then please come and check out my presentation. I do it every Sunday. It's right after service. You can grab your lunch and come to the French room right next to the cafe, and you can. It's just 20-minute presentation, 30-minute presentation, and I think it's really great. So if you want to come, it'd be awesome. And then lastly, we want to thank the DeBoni family who's going to be cooking next week. And also thank you to the Stein family who's cooking and cleaning today. So let's give them a round of applause.